just left him on the beach. The Prime Minister's message is this is a political crisis. We basically don't want to go down the road we were last year. We want to basically try and sell a very kindly message rather than talk about the deficit, rather than these absolutely necessary measures of last year. They're no longer important. We're abandoning them. Bad luck, Mr Treasurer, for your credibility.
Thank you, Member for Werriwa. The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I call the Parliamentary Secretary and Honourary Member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to speak on this debate on the appropriations bills. And in the time available to me, I'd like to focus on three particular issues. Firstly, to highlight the fact that the budget contains a number of measures to boost small businesses and start-up businesses. Secondly, I'd like to highlight the importance of start-up businesses. And thirdly, I'd like to draw a distinction between the Coalition's approach to supporting start-up businesses and that of the Labor Party. If I turn first then to the measures to support start-up businesses in this budget, these are of great importance because in any country with a successful technology sector, the role of start-up companies is critical. And if we can lift our level of start-up activity in Australia, the economic benefits will be significant. This budget contains a number of measures to stimulate the start-up community and entrepreneurship. We've committed to streamlining business registration processes to make it quicker and simpler to set up a new business. Starting a new business is not easy, but government can do a lot to make the path easier for Australians who are prepared to have a go. The government is going to develop a single online registration site for business registration, including company registration. We will allow start-up companies to immediately deduct professional expenses incurred when they begin a business, such as legal expenses on establishing a company, trust or partnership, rather than the present situation in which you write them off over 5 years. And this again will provide immediate cash flow benefits. Madam Deputy Speaker, employee share schemes are vital for start-up businesses. The previous Labor government unfortunately was hostile to employee share schemes. Its tax settings made such schemes unattractive to offer or to participate in. The Coalition has a very different attitude. From 1 July, there will be expanded tax concessions for employee share schemes to make it easier for small start-up companies to attract and retain the talent they need to grow. Start-up companies in the early stages of growth will face a lighter tax burden. For companies with an annual turnover of less than $2 million, the company tax rate will be cut by 1.5 percentage points to 28.5%. Start-ups will also benefit from an important stimulus measure for businesses with an annual turnover below $2 million. Between now and the end of 2016-17, any asset worth up to $20,000 purchased by a small business will be immediately deductible in full, again giving a significant cash flow boost. The government has also announced that we will be removing obstacles to crowdsourced equity funding, that is to say, using the internet to raise equity for new projects or business ventures, often involving relatively small amounts raised from large numbers of people. In other countries, this is an increasingly important source of funding for start-up businesses, but presently there are regulatory restrictions that limit its availability in Australia. We've also announced changes to the significant investor visa, with applicants for this visa now required to invest at least $500,000 in eligible Australian venture capital or private equity funds, that's to say funds which invest in start-up and small private companies. So clearly, Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget is a start-up budget to support our growing start-up sector. Let me then turn to why start-up businesses are so important. In the technology sector around the world, start-up companies form a critically important part of the growth cycle. A start-up is a company formed from scratch, typically with the aim of commercialising some technology. It might be software, it might be medical technology or biotechnology, it might be renewable energy technology. And the most successful start-ups grow at extraordinary rates. Google, for example, was founded in 1998 and by 2014 it was the third largest company in the world by market capitalisation. Start-up companies have a hunger and dynamism which older and more bureaucratised corporates often lack. And it's the companies which have built significant scale which are of course most visible. But there's vigorous activity amongst earlier stage tech sector companies in Australia. If, for example, you visit the tech sector co-working space Fishburners in Pyrmont, you feel a palpable sense of energy and dynamism, and you notice the diversity of the people there and the many start-up businesses they are working to get off the ground. One such business is What Cost. As founder David Suter explained to me, their product will let you monitor your home power usage on your mobile phone without needing complicated installation. Many other similar co-working spaces to Fishburners are springing up around the country as an increasing number of young Australians, or Australians of all ages, but particularly young Australians, choose to start businesses rather than join an existing corporate. One young Australian I met recently, Sam Crowther, has created a technology solution for easier and safer website login and user authentication. His technology, Casada, eliminates the need for passwords. It allows a photo taken by the user to be turned into a unique key. At the age of 19, Sam is currently in Silicon Valley, signing off on an integration into a global networking company. Other examples that I've seen recently are numerous. I've been very impressed with the work of Chris Gilbert and Johnny Wilkinson, for example, who are the co-founders of Equitise Crowdfunding Australia. Chris is an ex-Deloitte consultant and Johnny an ex-Citigroup analyst. Chris and Johnny left their corporate jobs to start Equitise, an Australian crowdfunding platform which was officially launched in New Zealand late last year by Chris. The pair had initially intended to launch the platform in Australia, but after the recent changes to New Zealand laws legalising crowdfunding last April, Equitise went ahead with a New Zealand launch. Current legislation in Australia means equity crowdfunding platforms do face some significant regulatory barriers, but as I mentioned earlier, the budget contained an announcement that the Abbott government intends to remove obstacles in Australia to crowdsourced equity funding, which means that going forward, people like Chris and Johnny won't need to set up shop in New Zealand to run a crowdfunding platform serving Australian investors and clients. Of course, another strongly emerging trend is the significant support coming from big corporates working with startups. Last week I visited Telstra's accelerator, Muru-D, based in Paddington in Sydney, which is home to a diverse range of startups. Those businesses which secure a spot in Muru-D join for 6 months. They receive tailored support from Telstra, including legal services and access to specialised skills within Telstra, such as their user experience team. Telstra provides a cash contribution and in return takes an equity stake. I had the opportunity to speak to the CEOs of a number of businesses at Muru-D. For example, the founder of Freight Exchange, which is a digital marketplace that enables long-distance freight carriers to connect seamlessly with their customers to sell their excess capacity. Or Disrupt, a business which is selling custom-made surfboards using 3D modelling, all delivered through digital sales channels. And both of these CEOs spoke very positively about the benefits their businesses have enjoyed from participating in the Muru-D Accelerator program. This trend of large corporates supporting startups is very much to be encouraged, and a number of iconic Australian organisations are involved in similar innovation initiatives. For example, both Commonwealth Bank and Qantas are working with Tech Beach, a commercial accelerator based in Manly, and I had the opportunity to visit Tech Beach earlier this month to chat with its CEO and co-founder, Darren Younger. Another trend that is very evident in the startup space is an increasing focus on fintech, that's to say the digital transformation in financial services. And the new Sydney fintech hub Stone and Chalk is an illustration of this trend. This is an independent, not-for-profit fintech hub with the objective of helping to foster and accelerate the development of fintech startups. Stone and Chalk has received seed funding from many of Australia's largest financial institutions, including ANZ, HSBC, Macquarie Group, Suncorp and Westpac. It's chaired by the former CEO of AMP, Mr Craig Dunn, who I'm very pleased to say is a constituent of mine in Bradfield. So there's clearly significant activity in the startup sector, and in my judgment, that activity level amongst Australian startups is increasing, which is something very much to be welcomed. How then does the approach that the Coalition is taking in this space contrast with the approach of the Labor Party? In his budget reply speech 2 weeks ago, the opposition leader announced a plan for a $500 million smart investment fund. Now, we all want to see more Australian tech sector startup companies grow into large, successful employment-generating companies with a sustainable market position, much like Seek, the company that the opposition leader cited in his budget reply speech, and other success stories such as Cochlear, Atlassian and REA, to name just a few. But the opposition leader's proposal, I'm sorry to say, was a little bit light on detail. To start with, he didn't say where the money is going to come from. This measure was unfunded, as were the other measures he advocated in his speech, which in total, if implemented, would cost taxpayers many billions of dollars. Nor was there much detail about how the proposed Smart Investment Fund would work, apart from the opposition leader saying that it would, quotes, partner with venture capitalists and fund managers to invest in early stage and high potential companies, close quotes. This sounds much like the Innovation Investment Fund, which ran from 1997 until new funding was withdrawn in last year's budget. But the opposition leader failed to tell us how he would overcome the difficulties the Innovation Investment Fund experienced in its later years under the Labor government. Certainly the Innovation Investment Fund, I need to be very clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, had some significant early successes after it was established early in the Howard government years. For example, in round one, not only was there funding of Seek, as the opposition leader noted, but there was also the funding of LookSmart, which was one of the early search engines, and that proved to be a very successful financial investment. But over time, the financial performance of the IIF deteriorated very significantly. That's to say the success rate on investments dropped very sharply. And then a really quite significant development occurred in 2013. In 2013, the then Labor government announced that there would be $100 million of public money invested through the IIF in conjunction with 3 private sector managers. One was to get $40 million, the other 2 were to get $30 million each, and they were then to go out into the private sector, raise matching private sector capital, and then set up in operation new funds to invest venture capital. Unfortunately, 2 of the 3 funds, 2 of the 3 private sector managers, failed to raise the matching private sector capital, and as a consequence, those funds did not go ahead. Now, this reflects the reality, Madam Deputy Speaker, that venture capital as an investment class in Australia has generated poor returns over the last decade or so, making many investors reluctant to put money in. I want to be very clear what I'm arguing here. I'm certainly not arguing against venture capital as an investment class. On the contrary, I think most people who look at the technology sector and the startup sector in Australia believe that we need to increase the amount of venture capital in Australia. So I think we can all be in heated agreement on the objective. The question is the particular policy measure that the opposition leader proposed, that's to say putting in $500 million of government money. If that's to be taken seriously, we need to have an answer as to how it is going to overcome the difficulties which have been experienced with similar programs under Labor government control in the past. Now, it is certainly the case that some very successful technology nations, and I'm thinking here particularly of Israel, have seen significant public sector investment into venture capital. And the well-known book about the technology sector in Israel, entitled Startup Nation, gives more detail on that. And I'm sure that the member for Gellibrand, in his forthcoming book, will have more to say on this topic, and I do look forward to reading that. I'm sure it will be available at all good bookstores, and I'm sure that it will sell even better than recent books about the IT and technology sector in Australia. But nevertheless, Madam Deputy Speaker, the obvious question which arises is whether a shortened Labor government would do a good job of getting a good return on publicly invested venture capital when you consider Labor's track record and approach in funding technology during the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd years. We repeatedly saw poorly designed, hastily conceived schemes to pump billions of dollars of taxpayers' money into government-owned behemoths, such as the $43 billion National Broadband Network Company and the $10 billion Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Madam Deputy Speaker, rather than stimulating the private sector, the policy objective seemed to be to drive the private sector off the field. A key point here is that the Abbott government has a focus on stimulating private participants and attracting private capital into the technology sector. And some of the policy measures in this year's budget, which I described earlier, are very much designed to encourage further private sector activity. By contrast, the Leader of the Opposition is proposing yet another government-administered fund, but he's failed to explain how it will help towards an objective of boosting the private venture capital market. Let me conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the observation that Australia's startup community is larger and more active than ever, and that's very much to be encouraged. There's no disagreement that we want to boost the tech sector and we want to boost startup activity. We've got a set of practical measures in this year's budget designed to achieve that objective, and I commend those measures and the budget to the House.
Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary. The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I call the honourable member for Jellybrand.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak on the budget bill, on the appropriation bills today, because as we know, the appropriation bills demonstrate the priorities of a government for the next year and into the future. And the budget should match the priorities of the nation. And unfortunately, despite all its talk about making family violence a national priority,